Well, good evening. This is the BLACKHEART, and I'm Rick Howland, the conservative. And we're here tonight. We're going to be talking about education. Hammer Brewster is going to be our guest, and Charlie Bell is going to be our guest. They competed against one another in the first district school board race. And we're going to just talk about education in general. It's a subject close to my heart. My mom was a teacher. A bunch of people in my family were teachers. And in fact, like I said a while ago, you remind me of my mom. You know, I mean, she's very prim. You know, very, very, very. Not that you're not. Don't get me wrong. She just reminds me of Mama. Yeah, that's all. But anyway, we've over the last decade or so, we've gotten charter school law introduced, and we've got it passed. We have to figure out how to fund it. Mm-hmm. And hopefully within the next year or so, we'll have some charter schools up and running. And both you ladies are educators. You have a school of your own. What is your?
The Hammer L. Mathis Urban Institute.
Okay.
It was originally designed as an after-school program. But during COVID, I operated as a primary school.
Okay.
But yeah, its intent is an after-school program. After I graduated from Spalding, I wrote my senior capstone paper on African American males in the classroom. I thought education. I took a new, had a new light on education after I had sons, because I'm a black woman in America. I understand his plight in America too, and so I didn't want my children to get caught up in the stigmas that African American males have to go through to survive inside of this country. Mm-hmm. So I was like, I need to create my own institution of my own.
Right.
So that's where that idea came from. But the reason why I did it as an after school program, because I was like, is anybody gonna really adopt? Somebody having their own school? Will parents invest? Come if I build a school, will they come? Mm-hmm. So I was like, let's do after school, and so it would be like a reprogramming. Mm-hmm. Honestly, so I study a lot. I'm very knowledgeable on a lot of things, and I was just looking at the system in general and how it was created. Mm-hmm. Doesn't have the best interest of us. Yeah. So that was my whole idea, was to have an after-school program. Yeah, they have recreation, but over here they have.
You're a perfect candidate when charter school law, when charter schools are able to be actually developed. Mm-hmm. You've got a good. You're in a good position to be able to, take advantage of that. Yeah. And Ms. Bell is a teacher you were principal of a charter school
Yes,
in Ohio.
I was a principal of a charter school. And how I even got into that, I worked in juvenile corrections and in the prison system for over 13 years.
Okay.
And it was more of a calling to start with the
you
tiny
don't look
people.
That tough.
I'm extremely tough.
I believe it now.
So I wanted to be more proactive than reactive.
Right.
So if I got into the school system and able to deter our children in a way not to go to the penal system,
right,
and be the example, that's what I decided to do.
Okay.
And that's how I got into the
Okay.
the charter school territory type thing.
Well, I tell you what, we've got a couple of clips of the gentleman that developed the whole concept of charter schools. Milton Friedman, he was an economist, and he was, if you've ever heard of Thomas Sowell, he and Thomas Sowell were friends. Thomas Sowell's still around, he's mid-90s. Milton Friedman, I think he went on early 2000s, late 90s. But he's a brilliant guy. And he came up with this concept of how he was looking at the disparities between in some areas of the country, because it wasn't true in all areas, between the races in school. And he said, what we need to do is develop competition in the education system so that the education system isn't comfortable with what they are doing with your children, as you have no choice because we're the only game in town. And he developed some ideas. He developed the idea of vouchers, tax credits, there was something else, and then the one that seemed to catch most people's attention was charter schools. And I'm not as familiar with it as I used to be. I've kind of gotten foggy on some of it, but it gives parents an opportunity to have something to do to influence what the not just what their children are teaching or learning, but when. That there's accountability when parents aren't satisfied with what's going on in their children and so forth. And it introduced competition. They're public. His idea was that they be public, and that parents, if they're not satisfied with what, and I'm doing this for the audience because I know you guys know what charter schools are. If the parents weren't satisfied with how their children were being served, they would whether they were rich or poor, you know, if they didn't have a refrigerator in the kitchen, mama could still go and apply for a charter or voucher and take their child where they believe they would be better served. Mama would have power, and mama and daddy would have influence over what the professionals who have become, who've kind of gotten, they seem to have an idea that, you know, you really don't have, you're not a professional. You need to let the professionals actually deal with this, you know. So, and Milton Friedman's idea was that we have choice introduced into that equation. So if we could hear those two clips, Milton Friedman, I'd appreciate it, gentlemen.
That the state of schooling, elementary, secondary, higher schooling in the United States is deplorable. That evidence is available for all of us to see. It is a conclusion that all of us recognize and are aware of. At the lower levels, we have seen problems arise, particularly in the major cities and particularly in the inner cities. We have seen problems of discipline, problems of schools becoming places for keeping people rather than for schooling and educating people. The one reason, the immediate reason, the reason that we can all see is the increasing centralization and bureaucratization of schooling. Education has increasingly become centralized, has increasingly moved away from the control of the local community to the control of broader and broader communities. It has moved away from control of the parents to control by educational administrators. Now, there is nothing wrong with educational administrators. They are fine people. Indeed, some of my best friends are educational administrators. So I have no prejudice against them. But as in every area, the question is the ultimate task of schooling the children running the administrators, or are the administrators running that task? Who's in the center? So you'll have a crystal clear illustration of the tendency that the more you centralize authority and bureaucratize it, the more it costs you to produce less and less. Now let me turn to my more fundamental reason. Why is it that the role of government in education has been increasing? Why is it that the parents have been given less control and the administrators more? And the increasing role of government in education is true not only at the elementary level, not only at the secondary level, it's also true at the university and college level. Fundamentally, I believe, it reflects it's part of a general shift from the philosophy of individual responsibility that prevailed in the 19th and early 20th century to an increasing belief in social responsibility. The view of the 19th century view was that an individual was fundamentally responsible for himself. It was up to him to make his way in the world. He was responsible for his success, and he had to bear the responsibility for his failures. Of course, everybody realized then that an individual was much affected by the circumstances of the society, that an individual who was fortunate enough to be in the United States could do a lot better with his life than an individual who was born in India or in Africa or in a less developed country. So this wasn't to say that society didn't matter, but it was to say that the function of government and of the social setting was to provide the individual with the maximum opportunity to express his own values, to develop his own capacities in accordance with his own values. Now, how can you give parents more power? Here's a very simple scheme for doing so. It's a scheme that is very old, that I personally happen to have been trying to recommend and propose now for over 20 years. It's called the voucher plan. And this plan is a very simple one. It says you're a parent, you're sending your children to school, the government is providing public schools for your children to go to. If you decide if you would like to send your child to another school, a private school, you're saving the city money. The city doesn't have to spend, the city of New York today doesn't have to spend $2,728 per pupil to school those children who are going to non-public schools. Well, therefore, the city should say, very well, if you relieve us of the expense of schooling your child, we will give you a voucher, a piece of paper, worth a certain sum of money, which you may use for one purpose and one purpose only, to pay the cost of schooling your child in any school you want to go to. Now, I say the city of New York would save $2,728, but I want to make this proposal attractive to everybody, and I think it would be very attractive to parents if instead of their getting a voucher for $2,728, they were to get a voucher for $2,000 or $1,500 or $1,000. In the usual rule, I would estimate that to have schooling provided privately of better quality would cost half as much, so that if you gave parents $1,500, they would be able to acquire with that better schooling than they're now getting for the $2,700 that is being spent on their account. Well, then the voucher scheme would say, any parent who chooses to send his child to a school other than the governmental public school is entitled to a voucher which he can use for the payment of tuition and costs at that school.
Now, you ladies both know that those numbers were from the 90s.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, 2,700 and whatever. That's even in New York City. That might have been 1980 numbers for New York City. But the idea he was explaining, you know, he only got into charters and vouchers. He didn't get into tax credits and so forth. But let's have. I've been doing most of the talking, so I'm gonna back up. You've had the most experience at charter schools as they operate in Ohio.
Charter schools, not only did we have charter schools in Ohio, we had the voucher program as well. So with the voucher program, the only time that you could be entitled to a voucher is if your neighborhood school, you were assigned to, you went to the school that was closest to your house. So if that neighborhood school was failing, then you could get a voucher to go to a private school. That was the only way that you can get the voucher.
Only if they were failing.
But the school itself had to be failing. If the school was not failing, then you
couldn't have the option.
Correct. Right. You can pay yourself, but you wasn't going to get the voucher. You wasn't
So
going to
in
get the
other
voucher.
words, the parents will, and the parents' desire for their child to be better served if they
Correct.
It didn't matter unless the school was failing.
Right.
So if that school was failing your child.
For the voucher program.
Yeah. But if that school was failing your child, but the school wasn't itself statistically not failing, that would mean that you were just high and dry and your kid's trapped.
Well, you got the voucher to go to a private school. You also have the option of putting your child in another school. You had to provide transportation.
Providing the school's failing.
No. That's it. That's period. So you can get the voucher to go to a private school, or you can put your child in another school that's not failing, but you had to provide the transportation.
Okay. It sounded like you said a minute ago that you could take your kid, but the school had to be failing.
For the voucher, yes.
To get a voucher.
But if the school wasn't failing, if the school academically wasn't failing, but it was failing your child, it just wasn't a right fit for your child. You had the freedom to take your child out of that school and put them in another school, but you just had to provide the transportation.
And you can get the voucher.
Correct.
Okay. Okay.
Yeah. Yeah, yeah, I'm sorry. I didn't
Because
explain that.
most places, they, you know, that's, if your school, if you're the school where your child is going, your child may not be doing well, but if that school has got good test scores and everything, and then your child couldn't get a voucher in a lot of states.
Yeah.
And, you know, so that was, that's the reason I
Oh, yeah.
was trying to get that clear there, yeah.
And I would say for the charter school, so the charter schools that I was associated with, it gave the freedom. We had the freedom of the curriculum of the school. We had the freedom of the parent got to choose whatever school that they wanted their child to go to. And we provided everything that the public school provided. We provided the transportation, we provided the meals, we done all of that.
Okay.
But the parent had to come and do an orientation, see if we were a better school, because like you said in the video, a lot of parents chose charter because it's more structured for disciplinary reasons and stuff. In the school that I was a principal of, we never had a fight, but the kids could not talk in the hallway because statistically fights start in the hallway when they're all they're all together.
Yeah.
So we gathered data from those type of things and how to set up a classroom and all those things as a leadership team that involved parents, the community, the principal, the deans, and we all collaborated to create those schools.
Right. Okay.
Yeah.
And you're like I said a few minutes ago, charter schools, vouchers, that would all help you in your venture. Because, and I really have a heart for some of these new ideas and these new institutions that are opening up to educate children. As long as the kids test, you know, on STEM courses and so forth. If as long as they're doing well with that, and the parents are satisfied with the methods that are being used, I really think this is just my opinion. I really think the public structure, they need to stay outside.
Yeah.
You know, now if there's a problem, you know, but if things are rocking and rolling pretty good, leave them alone, because, you know, you ain't doing too good yourself. Like I remember Shawnee, man, they shut down the top floor of Shawnee High School, and it was shut down for years.
Yeah, the floor wasn't done,
Yeah, well,
amongst other things.
that might be why they said they shut it down. But
And I think Ms. Porter, what did she say at the forum? She said they told her no, like for the renovations for it all or something,
Yeah.
because it wasn't a top priority or something.
Yeah.
Something like that.
yeah.
I was like,
What? Yeah. Excuse
you got
me.
kids in the building?
Right. That's it. What do you mean?
It's not a priority.
Yeah, because they said the enrollment was low. I said, but
Yeah.
did you close the school though?
But it's open, right? It's open, so that doesn't go together.
Yeah,
It is a
but-
priority. There's children. like
Well,
this
if
board to see the
enrollment
public
was
how it
low,
is.
the way they were doing things anyway, they could just assign some kids to go there. You know,
They could have.
yeah, they could have. I'm glad they didn't, because eventually I think this year they reopened that
They
top
did.
floor.
They did, but that was just another slap in the face of the community of not being a priority,
Right.
even though our children are assigned to go to a school. That school should have been top notch like every other school.
Every other
and
school.
it should have been a pillar of the community,
Yeah.
as schools should be.
Yeah.
And there is no way in the world you can say that it wasn't a priority and you have a third floor closed in a school that children are still attending.
Right. Yeah, in a huge school, one of the major schools.
One of
for
the major schools
decades.
with aviation, with a middle school attached to it, that's in the middle of a community that needs something
that school
to be
is
proud
90 years
of.
old.
Yeah.
That school was opened up as a girls' high school back in the 1930s. We're in the 20s now, 2020s.
Yeah,
Okay, so that's, it was pretty right around 90 years old.
yeah,
You know, and it you know, to do that, and
it should have never been allowed to even
to
get
be
to
shut
that
down.
point
yeah,
that those things didn't happen.
yeah, right. Can I tell you something? You know, I've told y'all I talk a lot, so everybody knows that. Brown v. Board of Education was not about integration. Most people think it was nowadays. But I remember, I was born in 1947. I remember my family was, like I said, were educators. And most people weren't interested in our children going to school with white kids. They were suing and had been lobbying, the civil rights movement had been lobbying for access to black folks' tax money to come back to the neighborhoods where the money was collected and benefit the schools where black children were attending, especially in states like Kentucky, where black kids were segregated from being able to go to where schools that had better facilities. Didn't have anything to do with instruction. I remember going into Central High School that used to be at 9th and Chestnut Street. And I remember asking my mother, why did they close the window and put caulk? I knew what caulking was because my daddy would caulk our windows, you know? And they left the window, they left the hole open next to the window. I didn't know what that was. The building needed to be tuck pointed. And so there was a space where wind could literally blow in around the window. And everybody at Central was walking around wearing their coats all day. And the city would not, in the school system, Louisville public school system, kept finding excuses. And
When did they fix it last year?
What?
Central High School.
no, they
It's
fixed it in 1952. The civil rights community
Oh,
here.
no, they had another issue with,
Oh.
They still got
Central.
issues
Right.
with-
right
with-
now.
With the building structure.
Oh, okay. Well, it's old now. It's
Fix it.
almost 70 years old.
Fix it.
Yeah, fix it. I'm not saying,
Right.
I'm not making excuses,
Yeah,
but
they
I'm.
just, you know.
But they was, but the
but they-
contracting was slow.
There was a deal that they made with the civil rights community in Louisville, because it wouldn't have been Brown v. Board of Education. It would have been some name versus the Board of Education in Louisville, Kentucky, because it was Louisville public school system. Because they were taking them to court. They were going, and they cut them a deal. Said, we'll build a new Central if you just don't take us to court, because they knew they didn't have a leg to stand on. But it wasn't about integration. It was about tax money being made available for the facilities and opportunities and the comfort and, you know, for that to be equal to what the white kids got.
Yeah.
Because you remember Brown v. Board of Education was reversed Plessy versus Ferguson, which said the states could treat the citizens, as long as they treated the citizens equally, they could treat them differently. And the courts made the decision, we're going to integrate. It was a tool. Integration was a tool to give us access to our tax money. And I went around the barn to say this. All of a sudden, charter schools and the vouchers and so forth, they brought it back to ground zero, where African American parents and any parent, I believe it should be across the board, any parent, if you're not satisfied with the education your child is getting, then your child should be allowed to have the benefit of going where the parent believes the opportunity better exists for their child.
Absolutely.
Yeah. And, you know, so next time people are telling you about, you know, it's integration, it wasn't integration originally. You know, integration ain't a bad thing, don't get me wrong. But
To a degree.
But it was
Right.
but it was about financing and making sure we had good educational facilities where the schools where our kids went.
Yeah.
You know.
And that was the biggest issue that we agreed on here in the city of Louisville, is that the schools stop this busing, make the schools equal. Because when you start taking kids out of their neighborhood, it's saying that their neighborhood isn't good enough.
Yeah.
And you're sending them to
Ooh.
another school.
You and Pastor Stevenson need to talk. That's what he's been saying
Yes,
that for 20 years.
As soon as I moved down here, I said, it's telling the kids that your neighborhood isn't good. I'm going to send you out here. But the problem that's going on is they're not getting treated any differently.
Yeah,
Probably
they get them in there
because they're not
and they
around.
track them.
They're not around.
know,
They track them.
You know, their environment, things that represent them inside of the schools. My daughter, for next year, she'll be in kindergarten. She has a
We're
whole,
running short on time, so I'm
but
sorry.
she has a whole PRP cluster.
Right.
King's right here. Foster's at the end of the corner. I
Right.
can walk
Right.
her to school. Why would you put my child in a PRP cluster? You
Yeah.
know, so
Yeah.
And that's, I guess we're gonna get into that with the school choice plan.
Yeah, well,
in the next
Yeah,
segment.
because we get ready to, we're almost down to it.
Right.
God bless you guys. Be with us next week, and we will further discuss charter schools and so forth. We're going to get a little bit more spicy when we come back. God bless you. Have a great week. This is the Black Heart Conservative, Rick Howland. God bless you.